All right. Hello, everyone. Thanks in defense of reason for inviting me here. I would like to begin by taking a show of hands. Like those of you who are from some technology domain, like you know something about software technology. Can you raise hand, please? All right. And those of you who have heard about free software movement before coming here, can you raise hand? All right. So the house is divided actually, 50%. I think almost all of those who are from technology domain do know about the free software movement, but there is half of the house who doesn't know anything about free software or anything at all. So as we had planned, I'll begin with a very simple basic introduction. I'll just let you know that because I'm a teacher, I am trained not to stop before 1 hour. Okay. And in case you get bored, I have also planned to sing a song. Okay, in between. That song will convince you that my talk is much better. Anyway, let us start. I'll begin with a simple introduction. Did I miss a slide? Oops, deleted something. Anyway, let's begin. So, I'll begin with some historical perspective on how software has evolved. I'm kind of assuming everyone knows what software is. Like this thing which is running in front of you, the software. What runs on your mobile phone is a software. So, historically, when software was getting developed, nobody had an idea that it can be sold. And the software was just freely shared. Early 15s, 16s, 17s, we had a period when people did not think that software can be sold. So, even companies like AT&T, they were just sharing their software freely with anyone. There was a letter by one very well-known person, Bill Gates. Everyone knows about him. And it's called a letter to hobbyists. It's there on the internet. You can all read it. In which he argued that, see, the software is being developed more like a hobby. And all these hobbies, that is programmers who are writing code, they have no regard for money. So software should rather become a commodity. If hardware is to be paid for, software must also be paid for. And this idea of software becoming a commodity started getting traction. So earlier, like IBM used to sell computers and they also used to give away the software for free. But now everyone started having this idea, and this was also the period when personal computers were becoming a thing. Earlier computers were not personal, like having your own desktop, laptop, nowadays we have. This is also a personal computer. So then this idea that software can also be sold, started taking hold. So it was 79 when Unix became proprietary, and AT&T started making claim that Unix, which was the one operating system, will be sold. It will be proprietary. So in retaliation started a movement to write software which will not be a commodity, which will not be something that is sold off the shelf on market. And that project was called GNU. Now GNU, GNU, in computer science, we are very funny people. We have something called recursive acronym. So the GNU stands for GNU is not Unix. That's how the long form works. It's a funny thing in computer science. So this GNU project, I'll talk more about it, had this idea that software should be free. Now, I'll come back to this, but when they say free, here free does not mean free of cost. It means free as in freedom. In Marathi, we say muft nahi mukt. So it is not fukat, or it is not without money, but basically the concept, it has to be azad, liberated, one with freedom. So the word free software, when we say the word free software, is not used to refer to the money aspect. You can obviously ask what happens to the money aspect, that we'll discuss. But it is used to refer to freedom aspect. So in French, there is the word libre. In Marathi, Hindi, we say mukt. And there is a Tamil word for those who can read. So it's basically the software which gives the end users the freedom. So which are the freedoms? So the 4 freedoms that we talk about are the freedom to use the software, to study and modify it, to copy it and redistribute it. Now that is quite difficult to understand to begin with. Like what does it really mean and how does it impact? But let me give you simple examples and you will be able to relate to it immediately. So suppose you go and buy a Bajaj bike and it comes with a disclaimer that this bike is only for going to college, not going for market. Is it okay? Is it okay? It's not okay. But then when you purchase Microsoft Windows Home Edition or Microsoft Office Home Edition, then you are prohibited to do commercial DTP work using it. It is supposed to be for home use, not for commercial use. It's the same software, it can do things, but then they prohibit you from using for a particular purpose. That is putting a lot of restrictions on the end users. Second is the freedom to study and modify it. Now, let's say you have this fan in your house. Is there a law which says that you cannot open the fan, see inside it, and see how it works, and then you fix it yourself? Is there a law which says it? There's no such law, except maybe the company will say the warranty is void if you open it. But even after the warranty, you can always open and fix it, or you can take to a local repairman and the repairman will repair it. But in the case of software, that is prohibited. Like when you install Microsoft Office or Adobe Photoshop, you have to accept something called license agreement. They say you are not allowed to do it. If you see in the software and how it works and you try to fix a problem, that is illegal. That is the reality of the software world. Then there is a simple thing called copying the software, which I am sure everyone here has done. Like your friend brought you a software on a pen drive, karle install and okay, but then I guess most of you know that it is not legal in most of the cases. You just carry a software on a pen drive and install, and everybody does it. I mean, I have not found a single person in India who has not done it. Everybody has done it, and everybody is actually very happy about it. But then it is illegal. It is illegal to carry a Adobe Photoshop or a Microsoft Office on your pen drive and give it to a friend and they'll use it. And finally, the distribution means that you're giving it away. So you are not allowed to sell Microsoft Windows. Only the allowed people are, they can do it. Those who are permitted to do it. So when this free software idea came, people said we'll give the users these 4 freedoms with our software. That anybody can copy, anybody can see how it works, anybody can fix it, anybody can improve it. There is no restriction on what you do with the software. You can freely use it for whatever you want, and anyone can just put it up on a website and ask people to download it. You can also put it up and so on. That was the idea. So there was this Free Software Foundation which was started, and there was a guy called Richard M. Stallman who took initiative in doing this. He's famously called RMS. We started something called Free Software Foundation, which still continues its work today, Free Software Foundation. Now, many of you have heard about something called Linux. Can we have a show of hands again, those who know something called Linux? Good number. Even those who are not from technology background, many of you know about Linux. Just to give you an idea, what I'm running here is a flavor of Linux. It is not Windows. This thing which you see is Linux. Okay, some Linux. So that Linux thing came in around 1991. And Linux was also released as something called free software. So I'll come to the GPL part also. And there is something called open source initiative, about which I'll talk. So now, it is very clear that this model of free software essentially was targeting commercialization of software. So it was against the profit-making motive. I hope you'll all agree. That with such a software, it became practically very much difficult to make a profit by developing software and selling it. Because it is okay, like you develop a software, you sell it to me, but I have the freedom to give it to others. Now, how will you sell the next copy? Because I can put it up online, you give me the freedom, I can put it online, and anybody can take it from me or from the website, or if I give it to you, you can give it to others. You have the freedom. So how will the company who developed the software make money out of it? So it's very clear that it created a lot of hindrance for the big corporates that how to make money out of it. So that was one major challenge. The second thing was, there was this thing called the GPL. GPL stands for a license called General Public License. Now this GPL came with the software. Now, if you open up any book today, on the second or third page of the book, you will see something called copyright. Have you seen it? Okay, and the copyright says the copyright belongs to the author or the publisher, and basically it says you are not allowed to copy it. You cannot reprint the book and sell it. That's a copyright law, which many of you are aware. So the same copyright law, software companies were using to advance their own interest. This GPL said something very interesting. The Richard Stallman developed this GPL. And the Free Software Movement said that we release our software under GPL. What does GPL say? GPL says two interesting things. One, whoever gets this software gets the four freedoms. You can use it, copy it, modify it, distribute it, study it, do whatever. But when you give it to others, it must be under the GPL license. You cannot change the license. So you get freedom, you pass on freedom. See, it's very easy. Now, I developed some software. I said, oh, this is for the entire world. Take it, do whatever you want. But tomorrow you take it, you add 10 lines or something on it, you modify it, and now you sell it as if it was your own. That should be prohibited. That was the idea. So this was the idea of something like a freedom virus. That you get freedom and you pass on freedom. Of course, some people object to the word virus, but then basically the idea was that freedom should be propagated. It should not get restricted. Now you can see it really made life difficult for the big corporates. Why? Because there was good enough large amount of software getting developed like Linux. Now this Linux is under GPL. Now you are a corporate company. You want to use Linux to develop something. What does that mean? Now whatever you develop using Linux has to be under GPL. So you also make it public. Public as in make it available to the public with the four freedoms. So for the corporate world, this was a big shock. Now the most interesting thing that happened is some of the world's best programmers, giant programmers, they took initiative, they started writing code, they wrote thousands and lakhs of lines of code, many software, they released it under GPL. Now there was a challenge. Because it's a very good quality software, excellent software like Linux. Linux, you don't like anything, Linux is wonderful. And they had, now how do you compete with this? And you can ignore it. Obviously, you keep doing your Windows thing, Apple thing, parallelly, but it's a competition now. So for the corporate world, for the capitalist class, for the bourgeoisie in the software world, well, how do we react to this? They were, in some sense, they suddenly sense an enemy there and they started acting inimically. And some of them were like, okay, let us see how it goes. The real major shift came in 1998 when a group of people in the free software movement said, see, this is good, whatever you are doing is good, free software, freedom for everyone and all, but then this software should become more popular and more people should adopt it. And that means the corporates, and we are not against the corporates anyway, we are only for freedom, that people should get the freedom. We are not against corporates using our software. Only thing is they should pass on the freedom. That's what we were saying so far. But we should now try to do something to make it attractive to the corporates. And there started the open source movement. And that is a word many people know. That there is something called open source. So there is this one of the leading persons in the open source movement. His name is Eric Raymond. And Eric Raymond said that our difference with the free software movement is not over principles, it is only over tactics and rhetoric. That's what they were saying. See, yes, good freedom and all, will do this, but then we should make it attractive to the corporates. That whatever we are doing is good for you also. So he said that we don't reject their principles, we reject their rhetoric. So Richard Stallman, who is a strong proponent of the free software, he said, no, we are not okay with these open source people. And to quote him, he said, the free software movement campaigns for freedom for the users of computing. It is a movement for freedom and justice. I stress on the word justice. By contrast, the open source idea values mainly practical advantage and does not campaign for principle. So there was a clear split, that the free software people are saying that we don't agree with the open source people. So there were two camps in the free software camp and the open source camp. Those are two camps. It did not take much time. Eric Raymond said in 2008 that I think if a programmer wants to write a program and sell it, it is neither my business nor anyone else's, but his customers what the terms of sell are. So clearly the open source movement wanted to once again take interest in commodifying software. So I see it as a split, a right wing coming out of the free software movement and trying to attract the corporates to the free software movement. So what was their main point? Their main point was this, that our software is good, use it, you will benefit. Our software is good, it's technically much better quality, Linux is better than Windows, this is better than that, and so on. We have much better quality, we have efficiency, we are bug free, no virus, vagara, vagara. Say these benefits and make it more attractive. Secondly, this guy Eric Raymond also wrote a book, okay? Also wrote a book called Cathedral at the Bazaar. It's a very famous book in software engineering, in which he compared the development methodology of how corporates work, and in fact some of the free software projects work, against how the open source people develop software. Now, just to give you an example, how things work in the domain of free software and open source. What is our typical idea of a workplace and getting some work done? You go to an office, there are 10-1500 people, some supervisor, manager, super manager, people watching over you, taking a danda, and abhi time pe nahi aaye, you're not doing your work, and come on time, and you don't get a leave, and you have to work 8-10 hours a day, and we'll look upon you to get the work done, and we will decide what is to be done and what not, and in hierarchical setup where the capitalist class employs some managers to get the work done and make you do the work. That's a typical work environment in which most of us work. But the free software and the open source movement achieved something very different. What really happened? Like, see, now you have a piece of software on which anybody can work. Nobody is prohibited from working. So now if competing interests start working, like, all right, I have developed, say, Linux, you also have a copy of Linux, he also has a copy of Linux, he also has a copy of Linux, and we all say, okay, we'll work independently, or future we'll develop something different. Then most of the time we'll be repeating the same thing, doing the same work again and again. Secondly, we'll be competing against each other. But thirdly, most importantly, whatever I have to share it with you. So if I have to share it with you, you will also anyway get what I'm doing. So what's the point of doing it separately? The real thing that happens is we come together and develop it. Because there is no point in doing it separately now, unless we have very strong differences. I don't like you. I don't like to have tea with you. Or something like that. Like, I don't like your face. So or maybe you have real differences about what to do with the software. So normally a community forms around it. Like a group of people come together and see, they are already in the era of internet, email, websites. So people could communicate. People are already networked. So around Linux, they formed a community of people, thousands of programmers all around the world. And imagine this, and you don't have to imagine this because you can experience it happening yourself. I'm sure all of you have seen Wikipedia. Everyone? So do you know who writes on Wikipedia? Who wrote all that thing on Wikipedia? Did you know you can write on Wikipedia? No? Okay, so those who are not from technology domain did not know you are from Wikipedia, that you can write on Wikipedia. In fact, if time permitted, I could have shown you that I can edit a page on Wikipedia, but we are short of time, I am aware of that. So after you go out of this room, just open your mobile phone, go to Wikipedia page, you'll see an edit button. Just click on it and you can write on the page. You can add something. You can even do a mistake, somebody else will come and correct it. The Wikipedia actually got developed like that. That is quite surprising, isn't it? And this was actually something not imagined by people, that this is possible. Hey, everybody thinks, कोई भी आएगा कुछ भी लिखेगा तो क्या बनेगा पेज पता नहीं. I mean, people will think like that. I'll go and write a cinema story on Narendra Modi's page and so on. But people will, no, that doesn't happen. Why? Because if you are writing garbage, there are also people looking at it and they are going to correct it. And then you should have time enough to invest to write garbage every other day, which you will not have. So that's why most of the Wikipedia articles, though not all, are quite near to correct or not. People say that the mistakes in Wikipedia are as close to mistakes in the Encyclopedia Britannica. Okay. So the model of Encyclopedia Britannica, large Vishwakosh or like some elite people, chosen people will sit there and they know everything in the world, they'll write encyclopedia. That was the model. But this Wikipedia proved it wrong. That that's not the only model. Like a 4th standard kid can go and write on Wikipedia. Anyone who can do some click here, there and type can write on Wikipedia. And it works despite of that. So the Linux actually got developed in a similar fashion. Thousands of programmers all around the world have written pieces of code in the Linux kernel. And each of them has a copyright on the lines that they have written. And so the Linux belongs to all those programmers, thousands of them who developed it. And that is a Linux kernel, that piece of software, is truly written by people or the software people and is available to everyone equally. So that is the model of development in the FOSS world. It's developed by a community, right? So this is a wonderful thing that the free software movement, open source movement has demonstrated that this can happen, it is doable, that the workers can come together and they can democratically work together and they can develop great things. The Wikipedia is also a good example of it. Although there can be other arguments about the content on Wikipedia, how politically biased it is and so on, there can be other arguments. But it is practically a possible thing with the use of technology, demonstrated. So now there are these two camps. There is a free software camp and there is an open source camp, and they were competing. So this is the debate keeps happening, that the open source people keep saying that, talk about commercial benefits, technical benefits. People like Stallman kept saying that, say free software, don't say open source, because the freedom part matters. They openly said the freedom part is about politics, it's about politics in the software world, and it's a political fight. So we must use the term free software or liberal software or mukta software and not open source. Although the term open source is very popular nowadays. Now there are more terms now. If you have heard of them, FOSS, FLOSS, vagera, vagera. So FOSS stands for free and open source software. FLOSS stands for free, liberal, open source software. So people started using these terms as a way of denoting both of them together. Both of them together. And in my opinion, acceptance of the term like FOSS or FLOSS was a compromise from the side of the free software people. Because on one side, people like Stallman kept saying that, say free software, but a large number of free software people, including me, when I was initially a free software proponent, we started using the word FOSS, which in essence was the acceptance of the principle of we will work together with the open source people. And in fact, they worked together historically. They kept working on the same project, but they kept using different language. The free software people kept talking about freedom. The open source people kept talking about technical advantages. So coming back now, I want to talk about the concept of copyleft. This is a very important word, copyleft. So this GNU General Public License, which I talked about, they called it a copyleft license. Just to make it opposite to copyright. And the logo is also the Ulta C. Okay. That's the logo of the copyleft. The copyleft license signified that if you use my software to do anything, your software has to be under GPL. So touch me and you have to become like me. You have to touch me and you have to become like me. I am a freedom giving software. You want to use me? Use me, but then your software also be freedom giving. That was the compulsion the GPL license imposed. And that was really challenging for the corporate commercial world, because the moment they used it, they would be compelled to release their software under the same license, and then anyone would copy. Then they cannot charge you licensing fee. Then they cannot say that you have to pay for renewal. Then you don't have to pay the rent that you pay like a house rent. That would have been very difficult for them. Now the reality is, after how many, like almost 30, 40 years. How many years? 40 years, nearly 40 years. It is everywhere. I mean, maybe many people don't know. But if you are observing any software anywhere, there is a FOSS in it. There is some free open source software in almost everything. Most likely, if there is this looks like analog mic, but then on your phone you have it. Your digital watch, there will be some free software open source in it. This laptop anyway I have installed, but even you are running Windows, you run Google Chrome, that's open source software. And VLC Media, it's open source free software. So there is too much of FOSS everywhere. I'll just give examples. And I'm sure all of you have seen at least some of these. So this stands for Google Chrome, right? Everybody, Google Chrome is the most popular browser. So open source browser. There's a Firefox browser. If you don't use this, then maybe you are using that. Then some of you might have visited websites. Everybody has visited website, but most people don't know that 1/3 of the websites in the world, 1/3, a very large number, are written using one single software called WordPress, which is the GPL license software. You don't know because you don't see what is happening behind it. You just simply visit the Indian Express website, and you don't know that the Indian Express website is running on WordPress, which is a Mukta software. Like you can also run a website like WordPress, like Indian Express on your own, because you can simply download the software and run it on your own computer, and you'll have a website like Indian Express running on your own. Of course, you have to spend some time doing it, but the software is Mukta. You can do it on your own. It's possible. And some of us who know technology do it. Perfectly possible. And there are many other software like that Android thing, which largely comes under the open source category, though it's not fully free software. But everybody is running Android on this. And Android is nothing but Linux. Basically, there is a Linux in it on this phone. Unless you are using Apple phone. Most of us are running a Linux on this. So most of you are Linux users. On this phone. I mean, it looks like a Samsung OS or something, but they just modified it to look like Samsung. Because that Linux is Mukta software. They can copy it, modify it, put a Samsung logo, some Micromax logo in it, and flashes it. You think it's a Micromax. Inside it is Linux. So it is powering everything. Some of you are in technology will understand this. Almost every other language, programming language that was developed in last 2 decades is a free software language. But that means the language is available as a Mukta software. Anybody can write code in it, and language itself code is Mukta software. You can change the compiler interpreter if you know what I mean. Except very few of them. Most of them like Python, Perl, which are very leading languages, they are all Mukta software. The entire internet runs on Mukta software. I mean, it's not possible to imagine internet infrastructure without Mukta software. Take it for granted, like if there is an office of Airtel, there is a BSNL server room, there is some big, large internet corporations server room, they'll largely be running Linux. Even Microsoft today runs too many Linux servers. We'll come to that point. So, if you make a call now from your phone to your friend's phone, it will go through some, say, 50 devices before it connects. Be assured that at least half of them will be running Mukta software. At least half of them. And in fact, in most cases, almost all of them will be running this or that, something called as a web server or a database server or some language or some DNS server. So these are some software terms. And these are all basically Mukta software. Like they were not made by a company. They were made by a group of people, a community. And even you can copy them, you can download them freely from net, you can run it on your own laptop. Like I can run most of them on this laptop. In fact I do, because I'm a techie person. The top 500 supercomputers or the top 500 Fortune 500 companies, they all run it. There is a scientific experiment to find the Higgs boson. That entire thing was built around Linux. So just to give you an idea, how much effort has been done. So when we write software, we write it line by line, like you write an essay or something. So the number of lines of code is a measure, how much has been written. So there is a Linux called Debian, just some Linux. The estimated number of lines of code in that is 28 crore lines. It's not a small number by any measure. And all of that is Mukta software. Like you can copy it, and by the way, you can just copy Debian, modify it little bit and call it Abhijit OS. Yes, it is possible. You download that entire Debian Linux. If you know some little bit technology, just modify here and there. Title it Abhijit OS, put it on the website and ask people, this is Abhijit OS, you want to use it? I'm not joking. That is what the Ubuntu Linux actually is. They copied the Debian, modified it 7-8%. They call it the Ubuntu Linux. That's how this world works. That's how it works. That you copy things, you modify a little bit, and that is leading to large efficiency, isn't it? You are not reinventing the wheel. You are just using what is there. If everything was proprietary, that was copyrighted and sold, and then this would have been very difficult. Now there is a website called GitHub. Okay, some of you, those who are not techie, will not know about it. There is a website called GitHub. The most popular website in the technology world is GitHub. Because GitHub is where all the source code is kept. Source code is the actual code you write in languages like Java and C++. You know, but when you run it on your computer, it runs as some 0-1 type language. But you write it in Java or C++ kind of languages. So this is where you get all the source code. And look at the statistics now. The number of people who are writing code on GitHub is nearly 94 million. So that is nearly 10 crore people, 10 crore programmers. Ten crore people are writing code, and whatever they contribute is available to everyone. You can download it. You can use it. You can modify it. You can again copy it and put it and say, this is my new version. It is as easy as 3 clicks. Go there, click, copy is made. Add your 2 lines. This is Abhijit Firefox. You want to use it? Yeah, it is as easy as that. I mean, if you know some little bit of technology. Then the 10 crore people nearly. And how many contributions have they made? 3.5 billion. Oh, this is a big number. 3.5 billion times they said that this is my code. I am adding on top of it. So this has happened now. One very important thing about which I am sure, because most of the people who come here, I assume, are politically aware, that today there is a big threat of surveillance, privacy of people. Your own governments are spying on you. They want to see what you are doing with this, where you go and where you come from. The big companies also spy on you. The Google is always tracking you with your phone. A large number of people are becoming aware of this, that we are being watched over, that there is surveillance on us. And there are people interested in knowing what message I sent to you and in reading your email and so on. So the free software and open source movement, they started building software and making it available to people freely so that you can use that software to communicate with each other. Like instead of WhatsApp, you can use a messenger called Signal, where the source code is available to all of us, and we can actually run the Signal on a server on my own laptop, and then we can communicate using it. Then there is good enough trust that nobody is watching us because we ourselves are doing it, and we have the source code and we can see how it works, and we can see that nobody is taking our data away. So there is good enough trust with this software. Or there is a Tor browser, with which it's argued that nobody can see which websites you visit. And there is a Diaspora, which is a social networking website and replacement for Facebook, where people can run their own server and your data is in your control or somebody's control whom you trust, not Facebook. And there is a video conferencing called Jitsi, where you can all do a video talk to each other without some third party getting involved. You can just talk to each other on video using your own internet without any Google or Microsoft or the Modi government watching over you. So this has been made possible, and I'm sure many people here who are doing this or that type of activism are aware of this, and all of us use it. Among even common people have started using this because they trust it. Just to make it a note, there is one guy who runs a company called Tesla, and he recently advertised that please use Signal so that you will be watched over less. I mean, even those they also feel threatened with the surveillance that is happening because they are afraid of each other also. The capitalist class is afraid of each other also. So now it is so that 68% of the organizations, companies, big companies, are saving money. A shift is happening. All these big companies, they are saving money. with the use of open source software. And that is the real part of our discussion today. That what the free software movement really tried to achieve has not happened. The ulta has happened, and particularly over last 10-15 years, the trend has reversed. We'll come to this now. One important thing is now, there is something called as a permissive license now. The open source movement, when it started, another type of licenses became very popular. They were there earlier also, but they started becoming more popular. These licenses said that we are free software. You take this software, it's free software. Use it, copy it, modify it, distribute it, study it, wonderful. But we don't mandate that when you give it to others, it has to be free software. Now look at this proposition. What is this saying? That let's say me and Anand, we work together, we develop a big software, we give it to the world. But we are saying do it and do whatever you want. Now, whatever you want means what? Whatever you want. Oh, you want to package it and sell under your name, fine. That the free software also allowed. But you can give it without freedoms. Now you can add on it, but you are not mandated to give your addition to others. So it was a very good offering to the corporate world. The corporate world loved it. And these are called permissive licenses. Examples of that is MIT and Apache license. You look at this diagram now, from 2012 onwards, that's why I said last 10-15 years particularly. In 2012, the share of copyleft licenses was 59%. That has come down now to 22%. All that code on GitHub, all those lakhs of projects on GitHub, all those billions of contributions on GitHub, all that code which you can download, large part of it is under permissive license, which means Microsoft can download it, use it for whatever they want without giving back. So what does it indicate? This rise of permissive licenses, there is a strong influx of the corporate world in the FOSS movement. Look at the wealth that is created. Okay, if you try to measure the wealth, it was estimated in 2008 that the cost of building Linux would have been $10 billion. It was estimated that the total worth of free software in 2009 would be 400 or $387 billion. That time, the entire software industry itself was $400 billion. So we had already accumulated software, open source software, equal in worth to the entire software world. And now the corporate world starts taking interest because they see an opportunity. And particularly this is an opportunity when you have permissive licenses. That you can use all that, but you are not mandated to give back. Now, interestingly, the free software movement started with the assumption that will be able to motivate people to voluntarily write code and challenge the monopoly of the corporations. That was the assumption. The free software movement had this idealist notions that will be a rebellion of programmers from the ground up, and we will challenge the IBMs and the Microsofts and all those big companies, and will write such a wonderful code that they will not be able to compete with us, which did happen to some extent, at least in the initial 10 years or so. But now there have been enough studies. There are billions of, crores of people, not billions, crores of people who are writing software. What motivates them to do it? Like you can see an engineering student second year who is sitting right now in their lab and writing software and pushing on GitHub. What is the motivating factor? So there were studies. So the fact that a programmer has to earn a living and sustain and eat something was never answered by the free software people. So when Richard Stallman was asked often, how do you think the software programmer will make money? He just said, not my worry. Something like that. He just kept it unanswered. And it is rumored that once he said that you can work as a waiter and then write software. which basically means that you earn your living somehow and then do this work voluntarily. So this heavy emphasis of volunteerism was always there in the free software movement. The open source people actually said that these people have to accept the ground rules that most of us live in a capitalist society and we need to eat. So the open source movement was, although it was trying to commercialize the software and attract the corporates and so on, it was at least raising the question, how do we make money? This is a recent survey, 2020, a very large survey. The number one driving factor for all these people who are writing the code is that I want to develop and improve my skills. So basically, I want to become a better worker, a more efficient, more productive worker. Why? Because I get access to the latest technology, I learn from the latest technology. When I learn from it, I become a much more employable engineer. So that's what it practically means. I want to improve and learn. That I'll be a more efficient programmer. So when I go and work for Microsoft, I'll produce more value for them in the same time. That's the largest motivation. The motivation, like I want to limit the power of software companies, I dislike proprietary software, they come much down. In fact, the motivation that I'm paid comes much below. For this large number of people, it's a learning opportunity. It is a kind of free internship, sitting at home. So now the FOSS world is also acting as a free internship opportunity for all the people. If you look at, I think out of all these people who work and contribute, there are some statistics say that only 26% people are getting some money. They are spending nearly 10 hours per week, and people who have 9 years of average experience. So these many people are working free of cost, voluntary labor, to write software, put it up there, which anyone, including the big corporates, can use. So when the free software movement started, the free software people were called as freeloaders. ये इनको फोकट का खाना है. The corporate world criticized like that. But today we see a corporate takeover. So Thomas Lutz, a very known Microsoft engineer, said that these GPL people are making it impossible to make any income on software as commercial product. They realized it when the GPL came, when the movement started. In 2000, Steve Ballmer said that these free software people are a bunch of communist thieves. Use the word communist and thieves both. In 2001, Steve Ballmer had said that Linux is a cancer. In 2011, now we see Satya Nadella says that we love Linux. Now this shift is a dramatic shift from this end to that end. Now what is causing it? Because now they see an opportunity. They see that it is such a all-pervasive thing, and they, whatever legal hack that a GPL license could do, so what the GPL did, it was a legal hack. It was using the copyright law to achieve exact opposite. No. That I am a programmer, I take copyright on my software, and I say I give you under GPL, but you pass it on under GPL. If you don't do it, you violate my copyright. You are achieving the opposite of copyright using copyright law. The corporate world could find ways of, bypassing it. They could find ways of using it to their benefit. Today, you go to Microsoft website, opensource.microsoft.com. These are all names of Microsoft's own open source projects. Can't even count them. Microsoft source code is available to you now. You can download the source code of Microsoft under some open source license. So you can see how it works. You can change it. You can even make it work on your own laptop. You can do that. Microsoft allows you to do that. These websites, you just read the name of companies, Microsoft, Netflix, Facebook, Apple, Google, Adobe, IBM, NetApp. All these big companies, they have now open source their code. All of them, all these big corporates are doing it. They all are loving the FOSS movement now. They all are using it very heavily. 97% businesses today use this or that open source software. Why? They don't have to pay for it. And they now are relying on one scale largely on the permissive licenses, so that they don't have to release their own extra code on it. One major developer of Twitter in one of his talks, which I attended, said that at Twitter we are 90% of open source code and 10% our secret sauce. Now imagine this, you have something like Twitter running. Billions of people tweet every day and they all go out everywhere and everyone can see. How long will it take to build that kind of infrastructure? It should take huge amount of time. But you see now a very large software company with a totally different software like WhatsApp coming up in 2 years. Facebook growing like anything. How is possible to write that technology stack? Because most of that technology stack is FOSS. It's there, download it, attach it here, there, combine it together, make it work for your own purpose. They are not writing that software. They're just reusing what has been already done. And they don't have to pay for it. They don't have to pay. Most interestingly, 65% of the companies are now paying some people to actually work on open source. They are no longer interested in keeping the source code secret. In fact, some of the people here who are in the technology world may be getting paid by this or that company to write source code and put it up on the GitHub so that anyone can download. Some of the largest software in the FOSS world were acquired by big corporations. Microsoft purchased the GitHub, IBM purchased Red Hat Linux, and Oracle purchased MySQL, one of the largest database software in the world. Most popular database. Why? They believed that even after acquiring it and giving all the people the freedom to copy it, modify it, they will be able to control it. They will be able to control the development of the software. Why and how? By maybe paying some developers full time to work on it and then deciding every time what gets done. So there is a saying, like, I know the open source software world used to say that anyone can participate. Anyone who shows up can participate in our decision making. But then the question is, who can show up? Like, do I really have the time to go and participate in your decision making? And if Microsoft or Adobe or Google have already employed someone to work on it full time, they will definitely show up. And they will definitely participate in the decision making. And they will drive the direction in which the software gets developed, benefiting from the free contributions of the volunteers. So the corporate world is now in a situation where they are able to do free riding on the contributions done by the volunteers. Interestingly, now you look at it, the free software movement itself, because they just kept saying about, we only care about freedom, we are not capitalists, we are not communists, we are not anarchists, we are just freedom-loving people, we just want freedom in the software world. So they had never any principled objections to aligning with corporate. The Apache Software Foundation, which is a foundation, a non-profit, is sponsored by all these companies, the big corporate. The Free Software Foundation, which is essentially started by Richard Stallman and a very core group of Free Software Movement, itself is sponsored by these big corporates. That itself is sponsored by. So why are they paying money? Why are they paying money? To some in the open source world, it is our victory. So it is our victory. We never compromise on what the freedom part, and these companies, if they are paying us, it is our victory that they accepted our pitch. It is actually a loss, because now they see an opportunity in what you are doing and benefiting from it. So just some quotes from online blogs. The Boring Cactus blog says that a big Mozilla layoff reflect Mozilla search for profit over impact. So Mozilla is the kind of non-profit which develops your Firefox browser. And they laid off people because they had a corporate pressure to lay off people. It also says that random individual contributors almost never get paid. So most of the people who are developing FOSS now are unpaid. They are doing voluntary contributions out of their learning motive or because they just like it or whatever, but they are not getting paid. Now look at this very interesting project that are happening. This Microsoft, Google, Twitter, Facebook, which are supposed to be competing against each other, isn't it? They are developing a project together called the Data Transfer Project, help you move your data from one platform to another. That project is open source. So practically it is not owned by any one of them. So they are paying money, they are investing into developing something which will be owned by people, conceptually by people. Because it is open source. You can also download that project and run on your laptop. The question is, will you and can you? It's only they who will be in a position to run it because they have all the servers, they have the server farm, they have the ability to pay for the electricity bill and so on. But they are giving the software to you. One of the most interesting case, and many of you don't know about this, but I'm sure everybody has heard the word cloud. Yeah, there is a cloud software. So one of the most core software in the cloud is called OpenStack. Now this OpenStack software, you see all these Microsoft, you have heard something called Microsoft Azure and AWS, and these are something called cloud. So OpenStack is one such software which actually is the backbone of the cloud by most of the companies. It was developed by 675 companies coming together. Socialism aa gaya na? Companies cooperating with each other, not competing. They're like socialism has now come on earth. They are cooperating with each other. They are developing it together to develop a software which will be free software. How is this possible? This is happening because they definitely see a value coming out of this. So I have more examples. Okay, one significant thing that happens is something called as the SaaS, software as a service. Now all of you use Google Docs. Everyone uses Google Docs. Where is the software? Where is the software? It is in your browser. It's not on your computer. It is in your Google Chrome running and on the server on the other side, Google. You never get the software. Software is never distributed. There is a single copy running there, kind of thing. So now where is the issue of distribution? Now where is the free software in picture? Now these companies are not mandated. And I'm sure Siddharth will talk about something called AGPL related to this, but then it has not got any traction. So most companies are able to run Linux on their server, give you Google Docs using it, but then they are not mandated to share the code of Google Docs with you. So you cannot have your own Google Docs running on your own server. Very interesting thing. Look at it. And most college students are running behind it now. There is something called Google Summer of Code. It's such a high profile competition that lakhs of software students, they are vying for an opportunity to get a Google Summer of Code. What is this? There are hundreds of open source projects. Google pays you for contributing to it. What has Google got to do? I write code, let us say, for this particular software, LibreOffice. I write software for this. Google pays me. Why? What's the relationship? It's open source software developed by totally independent, different set of people who even don't know each other. Google pays me for this. Why? Google sees a value in it. What is the value Google sees in it? We have to ask that question. So essentially, they have found a way now. One, they are getting more efficient programmers by promoting this because you are getting trained much better. Second, they are benefiting from the free contributions of all the volunteers all around the world. Their corporates have become the freeloaders in the open source free software movement. So it has been taken over. Now, why did this happen? I will admit it and do a self-criticism that I was a part of this movement for a long time, and we had very fancy hopes that this will revolutionize the world, will challenge capitalism and everything before I became a Marxist. So we had all these, notions, romantic notions. Okay, we can replicate this in every other domain, and then the world will be one, everything will be shared, socialism or direct communism will appear like that. People had such notions. It has failed. In fact, the corporate world has taken over. Why? So we can try to find roots in the ideological underpinnings of this movement. And I'm sure Siddharth will also talk about the ideological basis of this movement. Now let's understand one interesting thing about software compared to any other thing. One, software is pure knowledge and knowledge grows when shared. Other things reduce when shared. Like the tangible thing. This is one mic. If I give it to you, I have no mic. But I sing a song, you hear it, then there are two songs. I give you a copy of a movie, then there are two copies of the movie. I give you a software, there are two copies of the software. Because the replication cost is nothing. And it's pure knowledge. It can replicate any number of times. There is no depreciation. Use a software, it doesn't reduce. This mic will die after 5 years. Software remains as it is. There is no Marathi Gistani software. It remains as it is. Your pen drive may become bad, but the software doesn't. So there is no depreciation of the software. It is infinitely reusable. Like other raw materials are usable once. Let's say you use a piece of paper to make a book, done, that piece of paper is gone. But software, you copy it, and then you do whatever with it. And the duplicating cost is practically zero. Like we never think of the money when you copy something, because you can delete it. We never think of it. So it's practically not zero, but then practically zero. That's a practically zero cost. So software in that sense becomes a different commodity. And that was getting commercialized, and the free software movement challenged it, and to a large extent it challenged it properly. That did not let it become a commodity like any other thing, like this phone or this mic. It could do that. But then it could not challenge the monopoly. It could not challenge the big corporations. So what was the ideology behind the free software movement? So one thing many of them did is they carefully avoided making any ideological statements. Stallman and others, they never said what is their ideology. When asked about capitalism, socialism, communism, simply no answer. But in one instance, when Richard Stallman was asked, is free software anarchist? He gave a very vague answer. He said that there is a communist aspect of free software, there is a Catholic aspect of free software, and there is an anarchist aspect of free software. Please don't read this. There is too much text. When there is too much text, we don't read it. Okay? So you read a green part. So one thing, he was himself extremely confused. But these three are very conflicting ideologies: Catholicism, anarchism, communism. Or he was just trying to divert the question away. But he never took a very principled position. One person who took a very firm stand is a very prominent figure, is Eben Moglen. He is the legal advocate of the Free Software Foundation, or was advocate, I think, till some time. And he wrote an article called Anarchism Triumphant. And Anarchism Triumphant, Free Software and the Death of Copyright. In which he can be clearly said saying that in a network society, anarchism is a viable political philosophy. So these people were actually envisioning that free software is an anarchist project. It will grow. There will be a rebellion from below. And it's a philosophy in a network society, because they could see internet is happening, people are getting networked together, they can all talk to each other. So for them, anarchism was a viable political philosophy. They really believed that anarchism will lead to a rebellion in other fields also, and another revolution is possible. Now, obviously, the concept of network society itself is a bad concept, because even though you are on the network, you are not equal on the network. Like, you can't really participate equally on the network as Mr. Ambani can. I mean, he can set up 1,000 websites and 200 news channels. You cannot. You can simply make a phone call or send a text message. That's it. They have much more power over the network than we have. We are not equal participants in the network. Eben Moglen says, and this was correct, he says that free software, at the risk of repeating, is the commons. So this concept of commons has dominated the anarchist thought all the time. What is commons? Commons, to put it in simple words, is commonly owned public property. Anyone can come and use it, like this road. This road is a commons. You can walk on the road, Ambani can also walk on the road, and that's what they say. That's the idea of commons. Or there's a public garden. Apparently a commons. You can go in the garden, anyone can go in the garden, no bar, no fees, no entry fee. So a toll road is not a commons. Toll road is not a commons because you have to pay fees there. But this road, you don't pay anything. Anybody can just walk. Anybody who has not paid tax in Hyderabad can also walk here. So it's a commons. That's the idea. So free software, they said, is a commons. And I'll come back to the notion of commons. What is wrong with the notion of commons? In fact, the open source people were also influenced by anarchism. Eric Raymond, in the famous book Cathedral and Bazaar, He in fact quotes Peter Kropotkin in that book. Peter Kropotkin was a famous anarchist from Russia. They had this idea that the commercial world cannot win a race with the open source community, and that the open source communities can put in way more effort into solving a problem, which did happen, but then they could not see that the corporate world will take over. So what has the FOSS movement achieved? The FOSS movement has achieved this thing that they showed that people can work together democratically and do production. Democratic way of production is possible. They have resisted software patents to a large extent, and they have helped people preserve privacy and security on the web and help us protect our democratic rights also to some extent. In fact, what the open source movement promised was that we'll be able to produce more, and they achieved it. Too much software there. They said we are a better way of producing software. They achieved it. Too much software. So they were offering a better capitalism, more efficient way of producing things, more development of productive forces, to put it in Marx systems. That we will lead to better development of productive forces with the same relations of production, with the capitalist relations of production. And it has happened. The free software movement romantically wanted to change the relations of production, but it failed. Because the entire software world is now commercialized. Programmers either work free of cost or they work for money. So the free software movement is a progressive but not a radical movement. It has no potential to bring a revolutionary change in the world because it never questioned capitalism in general. It never questioned exploitation of workers in capitalism. That was never their agenda. They simply kept saying freedom, freedom, freedom. They still keep saying freedom. It started as a challenge to the capitalist control, and with all their romantic anarchist notions, they believed that they'll be able to challenge software capitalism or capitalism. That did not happen. So for free software people were idealist, adarshwadi. Open source people were more pragmatic, but both were capitalist. The pragmatists won. The open source is everywhere now. So the realist viewpoint has won over the idealist viewpoint. The cost is now, there are too many people contributing free of cost. I have many friends in the free software movement. They keep doing voluntary work, still believing that this will bring some revolution. It is costing them their life. Many of them live very simple lives, thinking that it is bringing a big change, but no, that's not coming. So it's a failed attempt at hacking capitalism. In fact, there was a book called Hacking Capitalism, written by the free software people, saying that we are going to hack capitalism from within. The capitalism hacked your movement from within. The ulta has happened. So it failed. What changed for the programmer? The programmers are still looking for a job because the software is free, but food is not free. So we in the free software movement called it Akshay Patra. In the Hindu mythology, is the notion of Akshay Patra. Akshay Patra is a pot which gives infinite amount of food. No matter how much you want, it will keep giving you. So the free software is like Akshay Patra. Yeah, it's Akshay Patra, but of software, not food. To make a living, you have to go and look for a job. So the root of this lies in the notion about property. The anarchist had always a wrong notion about property. Proudhon, the great-great-grandfather of all the anarchists, where this whole thing started in the times of Marx, wrote in one of his articles that property is theft. And if you have seen a movie, the movie is called Young Karl Marx. A very famous movie in which they actually portray this scene, where Proudhon is saying this and Marx goes and challenges him about this notion. So Marx said that if you are calling property as a theft, then you are actually presupposing the existence of property. Like it's a very cyclic argument. That something was a property means it was owned by someone else. So how did the ownership come into existence? You are not addressing it. So there is a fancy notion about property that the anarchists have, and there is a capitalist property, there is a feudal property, there is a property in slavery, and the property had changed its notion that is upset to the anarchists. They think that property can disappear all of a sudden. So what is common in a capitalist society? We have to ask that question. What is the meaning of a common property? We say this road is a public property, anyone can go. But then I don't have a car and you have a car, so you have a right over 40 square feet, I have a right only on 1 square feet. And if all the car people park their cars on the road, I have no place to walk. And in fact, that's what happens. Like if you are like you have a big limousine, you can even drive that. And you then get a larger share of the commons. That's what happens with every commons, even in capitalism. For those of you who come from some Marxist background, historically, like when Marx writes Capital, he mentions that the capitalist class, when it was growing up, in the initial stage of primitive accumulation of capital, took over the commons and converted into the private property. Lenin cites the example of the Russian commonly owned land in the villages called Mir. The Narodniks in Russia had high hopes from the Mir land that this will become a basis for communism. The Mir lands were privatized in the decade of 1910 and they become capitalist private property. So capitalism always had this strong weaponry to break any commons and make it a private property. Now, in that era of corporate multinational capitalism, the free software movement comes with the idea that will create a new commons. Good. Commons is good for common people. We should not say no to it because if there is a road, I can walk on it at least. If there is no road, where will I walk? If there is free software, I can download. If it is not there, what will I do? I'll be without software. So it's not bad for common people, but we should not be under the impression that this will challenge capitalism. Because the big people will always have a bigger right on it. Like this free air. Air is commons. You can breathe, I can breathe, Ambani can breathe. Modi can also breathe. And we have one nose, so we can perhaps equally breathe. But then you are a big software company, a big manufacturing company, and have a pump and you can pump in lot of air and make an oxygen cylinder. So you have more right over the air than I have. On the same commons, you have more right. So commons always get used more by the capitalist class than the common people. And if the common people are making a commons, they have to be aware that the capitalist class will use it more. So they all talk about freedom. The free software people talk about freedom all the time. Yes, we all want freedom. We Marxists, we are not anti-freedom. We are definitely pro-freedom. But then as Engels asked, what is freedom? And we should always ask this question, freedom from what and to do what? Freedom from what? So Engels said that freedom is appreciation of necessity. Freedom is appreciation of necessity is the laws of society, laws of nature. As much as you understand them, you are free. If you don't understand them, you are not free. Only when I know that if I fall from this building, I'll get hit, then I don't jump. That much freedom I have. Okay. Knowing that I'll get hurt, I can jump or I don't jump. That's the freedom I have. Because I know the law, the necessity that when I jump, I'll be hit. So the free software movement people need to know the laws of capitalism. I think they need to go back and study Capital written by Marx and learn how capital works and how it commodifies everything and it breaks into commons and not have any wrong romantic notions about capitalism and the freedom that is possible in capitalism. So there is a limited idea of freedom. There is no freedom for programmers. Okay, if they don't have jobs to begin with, if they don't have hardware, if they don't have servers, infrastructure, if they don't have capital, there is no freedom. What will you do? I have a laptop. What can I do? I can run a news website on this. No, I cannot. I can run an email on this which everyone in the world can access. No, I cannot. What freedom do I have? I can't own a soft server farm. I can't pay 1 crore rupees electricity bill. What will I do? I can't. Further, if I don't have a job, then I'm in bigger trouble. There is no freedom from programmers if the rest of the world is not free. Software people, they tend to form their own islands. There were these romanticist socialists in the early 19th century. And one of them, kind-hearted capitalists, built an island on which he took all the workers and they built a heaven for the workers there. Only that person, he realized very soon capitalism cannot be beaten this way because he was losing the race as a capitalist because he was spending all the money on the workers. So if the rest of the world is not free, the software people will not be free. They'll be chained by the world of commodity. So as Marxism says, workers are free to choose whom they will work for, but as a class, they are slave to the capitalist class. As a class, we must keep working and producing. So there is no individual without society. So the free software movement needs to expand itself. Look at itself as a part of the larger working class movement. It cannot remain on its own isolated island. Okay, so the software people who are doing this, they need to rethink about their world. So anarchism as a mode of production is a failed romanticist idea. So the way ahead, I think, is the free software movement is not a way to fight capitalism, but it will remain a minority trend because it's very necessary, and people like us will keep developing that software, which is necessary for protection of democratic rights, civil rights, and privacy and security. But we have to reinvigorate our fight against corporatization, against open source software, and find new way of resisting capital in the software world. We have to unionize. In whatever sense it is possible, those who are giving free contributions, they should demand their rights. They should demand wages. They should demand their rights as workers. Because all the workforce is casualized. So these are also casual workers. They are also casual workers in the software world. They have to demand their rights and be explicit, not implicit in your ideological fights. So I hope I have not taken much time, or I have already. All right. So should I hand it over to Siddharth?